Okay, this is hopefully B'ezras Hashem, the first of many sessions to come. I'm using the Shari Leshem, which is a collection from the different Svarim that the Leshem himself wrote. Rav Shlomo Eliashov, one of the biggest Mekubim in the last couple hundred years. He died he died 1926, and he was well known amongst the Gedolim of his time. I believe it was the Chafetz Chaim who said that if you have a chance to see him now in his lifetime, you should do that, because there's no guarantee we'll ever get to his level in the world to come to see him there. That's how much respect the Chafetz Chaim. I believe that the Chazon Ish called him the last real Mekubal, last real Kabbalist. He was an amazing individual in every respect. The stories they write about him, tell about him, are tremendous. And he wrote many different Sfarim on the deepest and most important secrets and ideas of Kabbalah. And they're very complicated, very complex. But someone came along more recently and extracted from those Svarim the more hashkafic part, the more philosophical parts of what he would say. He himself didn't organize the material like this, but someone came along and said, "Well, this is talking about this, so let's call it that and make a chapter out of it." And he did a great job of organizing the entire sefer. This actually comes this first section called Kavanas Habriya V'Tachlisa, the purpose of creation. Kavanas Habriya V'Tachlisa, God's intention in making creation and the purpose why He did it. Seemingly not such an obvious question, at least not such an obvious answer. The question itself is obvious, but the answer is more complicated. Everybody throughout history and every culture probably has discussed this idea. What are we doing here? What's the purpose of man? Why do we exist? And there's different takes in it. And if the Arizal is talking about it, it's not because he doesn't know the answer to the questions, because he wants to show us something that people probably don't realize, don't understand on the level it's meant to be understood. Because the whole point of being in this world is to do Ratzon Hashem, to do the will of God. That's how we get to the world to come. And that's how we fulfill ourselves in this world. As much as we are driven by the Yitzhar to live and enjoy this physical world and materialism and things like that, the reality is that we're only happiest when we're doing what we're meant to do. And our soul knows that, and it's tied into that. And people don't realize when they feel miserable, it's not because they lack materialism. In fact, a lot of times people have a lot of it, but they still don't feel complete, because the soul understands this is what life is about. And if the deeper, more profound your understanding of the purpose of creation is, then the more you're able to fulfill it, and therefore yourself. So he starts off by saying, Amar Harav Zal, the Arizal, Binyan Tachlis Kavana Shabrias Ha'olamot Nivar Ata Beis Chakirish Nisasku Behem Hamakubale. We're going to look at two different discussions that the most famous Kabbalists of the past have had. Right, Hachakir Rishona. And the first one that the earliest and the later Mekubalim have all discussed, the Das Sibas Brias Olamot. What's the purpose of creation? Why did God make all of this? That's not for no reason. There has to be a very profound reason why, right? Le'eza Sibais, what was the reason for it? Nimna v'gamru v'gazru v'omer ki Sibas ha'davar ha'yalafisha hinei Hu yizborach muchrach sheyeh shalem b'chol pulasav v'kol kasav v'kol shmasav shel gadol ma'ila v'chavod. It's imperative that God be perfect in every way. Whether we're talking about His names, they have to be complete. But to see what that means. But we're talking about the actions that He does or is doing. They all have to be. Everything about God is perfect. Has to be perfect by definition. So that's the premise. If there's aspects of a Kodesh Baruch Hu that He shared and identified, and they don't come to be used in any way, so somehow that's a lacking in the reality of the name. You can't call God Shalem. Okay, we need to understand what that means, because you can never not call God Shalem. God's always going to be Shalem, always going to be perfect, but the answer will become clear as we go a little bit further. Whether his actions or his names or his other names, his nicknames, are less holy names. Kinei Hashem Gadol, the great name, the root of all names, the shorish of all the name Shehu Ben Dalet Osias Havaya, which is a Shem Havai, the four-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, often called in English the Tetragrammaton. It's the name spelled Yud K, Vav K, and some will not even say it like that, they'll say, because the name is so holy, we don't pronounce it the way it's written, because it's so holy. The time of the Beis Hamikdash, so the Kohanim could pronounce the name as it was because it was appropriate. But today, without a Beis Hamikdash, without a temple, so we don't have that level of holiness, and therefore we don't pronounce the name. Instead, we pronounce it Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, which we're used to by now, but it's called the Shem Havaya because it's the same letters, Hey, Vav, Yud, Hey, as the actual name itself. So it's a way to allude to that specific holy name. But that is the first revelation of God's light in terms of a name up high in the spheres, and it's considered to be the trunk of all the other names. All the other names of Hashem branch off from that particular name. Nikra Kain al Horis Havayaso Anitzchis V'Kiyumulad. And he's called this to indicate and to remind us that God himself is eternal. Haya Hove V'Hiya. He was, he is, and he always will be. There's no way around it. Everything about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by definition, is eternal. And as much as we live in a transient world and we come and we go, we have to always recall that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is above time. As it's been pointed out, that we have a past and we have a future. We don't really have a present because time is always moving. Right? What we call the present is just a chunk of time where change is happening so slow that it feels like time has slowed down or stopped to some degree. But the reality is that the present is only a threshold that the future passes over to become the past. And somehow we can experience it along the way. By HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the exact opposite. There's no future and there's no past. There's only the present. Everything for him, it was, is, and will be all at the same time. It's too hard for us to comprehend how that's possible, right? But we can have experience of it and we attach ourselves to God. The more you attach yourself to God, the more you feel eternal. That's why Shabbos is 1/6 of the world to come, because it's more of a Kodesh Baruch Hu in the world. So therefore, the more you keep Shabbos properly, the more you give a sense of eternity, even though the day itself is like 26 hours long. So that's what the name implies. Tema Bria B'Achrei His Havchu El Mashahaya, before creation came into existence and was transformed into the world that it now is. Im lo nivru b'alamot v'kol asher behem, right? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu had made everything in the world, lo yuchal lerot amises haris ha'avoisa yizborach hanisches be'aver v'hove v'asid. If the world didn't come into existence, then all there would be is Orein Sof. Maybe not even that. Something else called Atzmutz, which we'll talk about later on, which we don't talk about because we don't understand what it means and we're not supposed to think about it. But Orein Sof, at least, even though we don't talk about what it is, we talk about what it's not. Orein Sof, a light without end, the infinite light, otherwise known as, God's, light that goes on forever in every direction and all the time. It's, again, another concept that's very hard to comprehend. Ve'im lo nivra'u ha'olamot v'kol asher behem. If Hashem had not made the world and everything inside of it, then, right, lo yuchal lirot amises haras havayasoyis borach hanitzchis bi'avar v'hove v'asid. We would not be able to understand. There would be no fulfillment of this idea of God's eternity, at least in terms of us perceiving it, because there'd be nobody here to perceive it, or there'd be no time, because everything would just be eternal. So therefore, this Messiah, this reality of God being eternal, being the past, present, and future all at one time, would never have come to fruition and fulfillment without creation coming into existence. So the Kilu, right, Kivyochel, the world had to exist in order to give reality to that particular name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Furthermore, he says, right, V'lo yikra b'shem havaya, so what do we call the havaya? The Chain, Shem Adnus, Nikra Kain, El Horaz Adnus, right? The name Aleph Daled Nud Yud, which we pronounce, Adonai, right? That's the one we use in davening all the time, right? It comes from the word Adnus. An Adon is a master. So the word, that name of Kosh Baruch Hu, tells us that Kosh Baruch Hu is master over everything, over all of creation, right? Heyos lo avadim. Right, V'hu adon aleim. That is, there's avadim, because if you have a master, it means there's servants too as well, right? And he's the master over them. V'im lo haya lo nivroyim. Because Baruch had not created beings to be master over, lo yuchal likra b'shem adon. You can't call him adon, right? There's no king without a kingdom. There's no leader without people to lead. You have to have people to be master over, to be their master. If you can call yourself master all you want, but over what? I mean, just to be master over yourself is pretty good too. But that aside, we need to exist in order for that to happen. And that's the way that's with the rest of the names. It's the same thing with his nicknames, or at least the other names that are not as holy as Havaya and the Adnus name, Shekai, other names as well, right? Like merciful and gracious and patient, very patient. You can't use these names unless they're created beings in the world that he can show mercy to and be gracious to. It's the same way with all of the Kosh Baruch Hu's names. They all mean something. They're all dependent upon something being there that he can interact with and reveal these traits that he has. Right? So once Hashem made the world, so now we can actualize the reality of these names, of these traits of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore he's called Shalem. Now he's complete, because everything that he's called, everything he's known by, he can now actually act in that way and fulfill himself, so to speak, and perfect all these aspects of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? And nothing's missing from him anymore because creation came into existence.